Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. Before we kick off, I have a special announcement. So this week I'm going to be opening the doors to my meditation training program. It's called the Peaceful Professional School of Meditation. So if you want to experience the life-changing benefits of meditation, then now is a fantastic time to do that. So until midnight on December the 5th, you can enrol on the training and get a whole bunch of high-quality bonuses, which includes a one-to-one coaching session. So if you want to check out the offer, I've included a link to it in the show notes. So this is episode number 35, and this week we're going to be talking about a slightly touchy subject, and that is how to deal with criticism. What is it about being told that you're not doing something properly that can be so annoying, that can really sting? Because criticism is a fact of life, isn't it? We all receive it from time to time, and often it doesn't feel that pleasant, does it? So in this episode, we're going to be putting criticism under the lens and looking at how to deal with it without totally losing your mind. So without further ado, let's get started. Hey there and welcome to the Stress Less Living podcast. My name is Stephen Burns and I've been a practicing coach, trainer and hypnotherapist for 25 years. Each week I'll share easily digestible bite-sized ideas that you can immediately put into practice so that you can live a more harmonious and balanced life. Because life is challenging, but whatever we encounter, we always have a choice. We can take the easy routes or the hard routes, the low stress way or the high stress way. Well, the Stress Less Living podcast is about always looking for the easy routes in life, the low stress ways to accomplish your goals, get more of what you want, and ultimately live a happy and more effortless life. So if you're looking for the perfect antidote for the chaos of modern life, my friend, you are absolutely in the right place. So in this episode, we're going to put criticism under the lens and look at how to deal with it without totally losing your mind. And I want to start off by telling you about a recent time where I was criticised or given feedback, if you want to look at it that way. So I was out at a Latin dance social event. So if you know me, then you'll know that one of my big passions is Latin dancing. So I was out at this dance event in Edinburgh, and just to set the story up a little bit. So the social etiquette at these events is to not critique someone else's dance, even if you didn't enjoy it, because you're there to have fun. Now, if you're in a class, then absolutely, you're there to learn. You want to get the feedback, so commenting on people's leading and following is absolutely fine. But when you go to the social, everyone is there just to unwind. The last thing you want to have is your dancing critiqued. And it works both ways, whether you're a leader or a follower. So I was dancing with this lady, and I was finding that what she was doing was making the dance quite hard. Her position was kind of all over the place. But like I said, I would never say that to her because that's a breach of the social etiquette. And then at the end of the dance, she turned round to me and she said, "You know what your problem is?" Not a great way to start giving feedback, but anyway, "You don't let the lady finish her moves." And I was like, okay, thanks for that. That took me slightly by surprise, a wee bit annoying, but I just let it go at the time. Then a few weeks later, I was at a different dance event. And it was a great night, amazing atmosphere, and I danced with this same lady again. And I recalled what she had said, so I had this in my mind. So this time I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I let her finish her moves. So I did it, I did the best I could. And then at the end of the dance, she turned round to me and said, "You know, you're really bad at micromanaging the end of moves." Which was like the exact opposite of what she had said before. But this really annoyed me, especially this second time, for a few reasons. Number one, because of the breach in social etiquette. You're not supposed to do that at dance socials. Number two, I didn't really think she was in a position, because of her level of dance, to be critiquing me. But anyway, it's maybe my ego talking there. And number three, it was so poorly expressed. The way that she worded it was just horrendous. So I was driving home after this second event, and this was playing on my mind. I've got to be honest, it did annoy me. And then when I woke up the next day, I started to think about it again, and I was like, what's going on here? Why is this bothering me so much? And hey, I'm sure you can relate to this. I think everyone has had an experience like this where they kind of obsess over something a little bit stupid, a little bit small, and it just goes through their mind over and over again. So I decided to do some quick therapy on myself. It was a Saturday, I was free for the day. That's what you do on a Saturday, don't you? You do some therapy on yourself. And I used two main ideas to change the way I thought about that event so that I could finally let it go and enjoy the rest of my weekend. And it's these two main ideas plus a very quick bonus third one that I'm going to be talking about in this episode. So, first of all, before we get to these ideas, let's take a look at what criticism actually is, just so that we've got a bit of a definition here. So, criticism is where other people take it upon themselves to give you feedback, but it's poorly constructed and poorly expressed feedback. They've not created it in a way that is particularly positive or helpful, at least on the surface anyway. And the reason why criticism can often sting so much is because we often see it as an attack. We think that the person is trying to go after us or take us down a peg or two. And you know what? Sometimes that can actually be the case, but the vast majority of the time, it's not. They're actually trying to get something across, but they've just not expressed it particularly well. So as a starter tip, I think it's useful to reframe the whole idea of criticism inside your mind. Rather than seeing it as an attack, it's just poorly expressed feedback. And the vast majority of the time, that's exactly what it is. I mean, if you think about it, if they've taken the time to go out their way to craft some kind of message, even though they've expressed it poorly, it does imply that they actually do care. You know, if they didn't care, then they would just be apathetic. They'd be indifferent. It's just like that old Oscar Wilde quote when he said that the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. Now, they might not care about you, but it does presuppose that they care about the subject that they're talking about. And it also implies that they want something to change. They want to take it in a positive direction. And that's a good thing, right? Now, of course, there are some exceptions to this, things like internet trolls or people who are just miserable and looking to lash out and disappear down a well of negativity. There are some people like that out there. But the solution to those types of people is simple. Avoid them and don't give them energy. But the vast majority of the time, the person does, deep down, actually want something to change positively. And this leads me nicely on to the first idea I want to talk about that can help you transform criticism and allow you to let it go. And that's the idea of the positive intention. So this is something that's been taken from NLP, that's neuro-linguistic programming, and it's the idea that behind every emotion, behaviour, belief, there is a positive driving force. It's a part of you that is actually attempting to get something good. Now, it might not appear positive on the outside, but the intention, the driving force behind the scene is actually good. So the example I like to give is if you were in your house right now, I'm assuming you're in your house, you might not be, and all of a sudden a crazy axe murderer was starting to hack down your door, attempting to do whatever axe murderers do to people, I would suggest if that was to happen, then first of all, you might want to move house. Why are you living in that neighbourhood? But I also want to suggest in that moment, that is a good time for you to feel anxious, to feel most likely quite a bit of panic. And the anxiety, that so-called negative feeling, is telling you that you need to do something. It's telling you you need to get the heck out of there. You need to take positive action. That in essence, the part of you that's making you anxious in that moment is attempting to get you to safety. So that's the positive intention behind that seemingly negative emotion. And this is true with all emotions and behaviours. Even though they appear negative on the outside, they have positive purposes. They have positive driving forces. They don't just happen randomly. They're not just there to mess you up. Behind the scenes, they are attempting to get something good for you. So some additional examples. So if we take a behaviour, so something like smoking, then usually people start smoking to fit in, to get a sense of belonging. That's the positive intention. And then later on, it often becomes a relaxation thing. Comfort eating, I guess the clue's in the name. It's usually about creating a sense of comfort or safety. And people who are jealous, jealousy seems very destructive on the outside, and it definitely can be, but usually it's an indication that the person cares. If you didn't care, then then most likely you wouldn't get jealous. Anger is usually a respect thing, or again, something to do with safety. It's the fight or flight response. Or imposter syndrome, which is the fear of being found out. Well, it kind of implies that you want to be successful. If you're afraid of being found out, then that presupposes that you want to actually succeed at something. You want to be respected by your peers. So this idea of the positive intention is also true when it comes to criticism. Like I said, it might seem like this person is attacking you, but there will be a positive intention behind their message. And if you can see that and then connect with it, it totally transforms the way that you think about that criticism, that feedback. You no longer feel bad about it because you see the positive intent that's behind the destructive surface. So to give you an example, so many years ago when I worked in the oil and gas industry, they put me through management training. And I've got to be honest, it was probably one of the coolest and most fun trainings I've ever done. So what they did was they brought in actors who pretended to be like members of my team that I was having to manage, and they would set you scenarios. So for example, maybe you had to discipline someone, or you had to deal with an employee who was having a breakdown because there was stuff going on in the home. So things like that. So the first scenario that I had was I had to convince one of my team members to do overtime. So this guy was an actor, he had to play the part. And the guy started, within about 5 minutes, he started shouting at me and calling me all sorts. And even though he was acting, it felt so real. The actors were amazing. And I really struggled with it. I didn't react particularly well. I got triggered and I started shouting back at this guy, even though the whole thing was this fictitious role-playing scenario. And afterwards, we got some feedback from our coaches, and my coach says, well, you maybe could have done with calming down a little bit, but he says the key is to see through all of the aggression that this person is presenting you and ask yourself, what is it that they really want? What is it they're looking to get that's positive? And if you know that, it completely changes your response to the situation because you realise they're not actually attacking you. They're after something good behind the surface. So that's the general idea here. You want to look beyond the surface and connect with the possible positive intention, the thing that they're actually after. And that really diffuses things because it helps you realise that they're not actually attempting to attack you, most of the time anyway. So if I was to turn the lens back on you for a moment, if you were to think about a time when you were criticised, as you do that, have a think, what do you think that person's positive intention was? Take your own angsts, worries, self-doubts out of it and just consider it from their perspective. When you look beyond the surface, what is it that they are actually trying to get that's worthwhile, that's positive? Hey there, if you are enjoying this episode and you'd like to learn more about the fundamentals of meditation, then I have a video course that you can enrol on for free as a podcast listener. So this is normally a paid course, but as someone who listens to the podcast, you can enrol for free using the discount code in the show notes. So if you want to check out that, like I said, I'll include a link to that free meditation course in the show notes and all the information that you need. So that's the first idea that can really help. And the second idea is where you make use of something called dissociation. So dissociation is where you step out of an experience and look on as if it's happening to someone else. It's like you are completely removed from the event. You're looking on from a neutral observer's perspective. So the analogy I like to use for this is it's a little bit like if you were to be filmed doing something and then you were to watch the film back. What would it look like? As creepy as that sounds, but what would that be like if you saw yourself going through an experience? And the reason why this can help you deal with criticism is because when we look on dissociated like this, it removes all the emotion from an event. So we get a bit of distance, a bit of breathing space, and it allows us to think clearly about it in a very objective way. Because in general, there are two main ways that we can replay a past event inside our minds. The first way is what we refer to as associated. And this is where we are seeing it, experiencing it through our own eyes. And when we replay an event from this perspective, we feel it so much more strongly. It impacts our feelings, our sensations, our neurology. However, when we are dissociated, we're much more disconnected from the event. We step out of it and we look on. on, it can feel like it's happening to someone else. So the feelings tend to drop off and sometimes they disappear completely. And we can think much more clearly, much more objectively. So it's kind of like, you know how it's often a lot easier to give other people advice about their problems than it is to give ourselves advice? The reason why is because with yourself, you're too involved in it. You're associated, so it's difficult to think clearly because of all the emotion. Whereas with others, you're looking on as an observer. You're dissociated, so the feelings are removed and you can think so much clearly. The answer tends to be quite obvious. So it's the same thing here. When you're replaying an event from your past when you've been criticised, you want to do it from a dissociated perspective. Look on as if it happened to someone else, and this will give you that breathing space and you can assess it more clearly. As an aside, by the way, dissociation can be useful for all of our past negative events, not just criticism. In fact, it's one of the key steps when it comes to healing any kind of past emotional wound. We have to step out, we have to give ourselves that breathing space, look on, and then we start to get some insights, some learnings, and these learnings can allow us to move forward. So let's just dig a little bit deeper into this in relation to criticism. So what you want to do is you want to replay that time in your past where you were criticised, but you want to replay it from this dissociated position. You want to look on from the observer's viewpoint. And what you're looking for is what I call the hidden gems. So essentially, you want to figure out what is it that you can glean from this criticism, this event, that you can actually use. What can you take from this that can potentially make your life better in the future? And it's usually when you find something useful, one of these hidden gems, that causes your relationship with criticism to completely change for the better. It flips it from being like a personal attack into a springboard for your future growth. Hey, sometimes it can even feel like an act of kindness. And I know that the person most likely didn't mean it to be that, but it feels like it because you've extracted something useful. So once again, I want to turn the lens back on you. If you were to, again, replay this time where you were criticised, but this time do it in a dissociated way. Look on from the observer's perspective as if it's happening to someone else. And when you play it from this perspective, what can you take from this event that can potentially make your life better? Now, sometimes the answer that comes back is nothing, that the person is just completely wrong and misguided in the way that they are feeding back that information to you. And if that happens, then that's cool. Often just realizing this from the observer's position can give us a huge release because we realize it's actually not about us, that the other person's just made a mistake. But the key thing is to explore it honestly and to do it from this dissociated, this objective space. So that's the second idea that can help you completely transform the way that you deal with criticism. And there is actually a third thing that you can do, a very quick bonus idea I'm going to add in. This is optional, but I find it to be a really powerful part of the process. And this is where you do something called future pacing. So future pacing is again something that's taken from NLP. And this is where you take the new learnings and the insights you've got from going through this little thought experiment, and then you project them into the future in your imagination. So you think to yourself, this hidden gem, this insight that I've got from this process, what will it be like when I'm using this in the future? How will this positively enrich my life? And to look back to the story I shared when I was criticised on the dance floor, I used this step and I think it really helped seal the deal for me and let it go. So I did go through the whole process that I've been describing to you, and the learning that I got was that actually she kind of had a point. There was something a little bit weird going on with the way that I was finishing moves. So the next time I was in class, instead of asking that lady that I was dancing with, I asked the teacher and she helped me with it, and I managed to correct something that I probably wouldn't have even noticed if I wasn't made aware of it. So I became a better dancer as a result. Now, I still don't like the way that she communicated it, and it was a breach of social etiquette, but I got something good from it and I made use of it. And that is the whole point of this step. Just finding the hidden gem can often be enough to help you let go of the sting of criticism. But it's even better if you can then imagine using that hidden gem in the future at some stage so that you can move forward and become a better person as a result. Usually that gives you an even bigger release. So once again, to turn the lens back on you, if you were to take any insights or learnings, any hidden gems that you got from going through this process and then project them into the future, how do you think your life would be better as a result? How would these things positively enrich your life in so many different ways? Just spend a few moments just exploring that, go off into some imagined future and project those learnings into that place. And just by doing this, wow, this can really help you get that release, because you're flipping the whole thing on its head. You're taking a so-called negative experience and you're completely reversing it. You're turning it into something that you're then using as a springboard for your future growth. So there we have it. That is how to deal with criticism without losing your mind. Let's do a quick review. So the first point I made was that you want to reframe how you look at criticism in the first place. So rather than seeing it as a personal attack, which is often what we do, you want to just see it as a poorly constructed attempt at feedback. And then the first main idea that can make a difference is the idea of the positive intention, that behind the scenes, they are attempting to get something good. And the fact that they've attempted to say something usually implies that they do care, they are passionate about the subject, and they do want something positive to change. So if you can connect with that, it just takes the sting out of it, and it almost always prevents it from escalating as well. And the second idea that can make a difference is to make use of dissociation. And this is where you step out and look on from this observer's perspective, as if it's happening to someone else. And this is a fantastic technique for getting distance and starting to gain new insights. And what you're looking for are these hidden gems. What is there to learn here that could potentially make your life better? And then the last idea, the optional one, was to future pace. So those insights, those learnings, those hidden gems, what if you were to take these into your future and integrate them into your day-to-day life? You might even want to project into a scenario that is similar to the one that you went through and imagine how you're going to respond differently to it in the future because of this hidden gem that you've uncovered. So another thing that I haven't mentioned in this episode is how to verbally respond to people when they criticize you. What do you say to them? Well, personally, this could probably be an episode in itself, but just to give you a little tip, I like to hook on to the positive intention or what I imagine that to be and then verbalize it out loud. And also it can be good to include them in the positive change as well, if that is appropriate. So you could say something like, well, that's great that you're really passionate about the subject. It's clear that you care. So I'm curious, what kind of positive changes would you like to see happen? And what part can you play? If that's not possible, or if it's not even appropriate, then you can just simply say, hey, it's great that you care. Thanks for the advice. And then go your separate ways. And that is pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. It is a touchy subject for many people, but hopefully these techniques can make a big difference. So if you enjoyed this episode, then I would love it if you could like or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're feeling particularly generous, then you can leave me a review. It would be massively appreciated. So thanks once again for listening, and I'll speak to you next week.